How you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. If you can hear some strange noise in the background, it's one of three things. It's the crazy wind outside, it's the rain on the windows, or it's my daughter screaming because she's home from school today. There you go.
Yeah. We had the bad weather over here last night, so I
Ah,
guess it's probably all made its way over to Germany now.
making its way east. Exactly. Love it. My daughter's home because she went to school today and she took a positive corona test. So they sent her home. Then she went to the chemist and it was negative, but she can't go back to the school because by the time she could go back, they were already swimming. So what are you going to do? Anyway, that's how it is at the moment.
It is, it is.
Anyway, usually at this point, I'd say to the person, would you like to introduce yourself and tell the world who you are? However, I'm not sure. I mean, you could talk about your blog, which is probably the most famous blog out there. It's been going since like 1937 or something. I'm not sure. 25,000 posts or whatever it was. It's a big old blog you've got going on there, mate.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the most popular one in the world, but it's probably the one that's been going on the longest. I think
Yeah, maybe.
I'll take that. Yeah. So,
Fair enough.
yeah. And I can't even remember how many posts there are now, like over 1,000, maybe
Yeah.
probably 1,200 or so. But yes, it's a long running one. So yeah, I'm Chris Webb. I work at Microsoft on the Power BI customer advisory team. I've been around in the Microsoft BI community for over 20 years. Started off with analysis services, then went on to Power Pivot, Power Query, now Power BI, and now I'm working inside the sausage factory.
Very nice. How often do you still use Power Pivot? Just Power Pivot, sorry, I should say.
How often do I use Power Pivot? Not all that often.
Fair enough.
I think it's fair to say it's not had much love recently,
Mm,
but I can absolutely promise you it's not been forgotten about.
okay.
Um,
Interesting.
I do use Power Query in Excel all the time.
Okay.
Um, I
That's
mean, I find if I was doing just straight Power Query stuff, like somebody sends me a CSV file and I want to do some stuff on it, I
mm,
much prefer doing that in Excel rather than in Power BI Desktop.
okay.
Probably because Excel is fast to open, and I just like seeing the results in the kind of the Excel grid rather than
Yeah.
having to build a table visual in Power BI and then zoom in a lot.
Well, I mean, the first part is much the same, right? Doing it in Power Query, and then it just depends on where you want to see when I can just do this stuff faster in Power BI. That's the only reason I would choose Power BI. The data transformation and sorting is much the same. My boss would do everything in Excel. If he could, my boss would do absolutely everything in Power Pivot because he loves himself a bit of Power Pivot, which I will
Well,
always
that's
mock him
good to
for.
hear.
It is
That's
good.
good to hear. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really ever an Excel person. Seriously, I mean, I learned the bits of Excel that were necessary for analysis services,
Mm,
so that's why I know cube functions and pivot tables and things like that.
fair enough.
And then, obviously, as soon as Power Pivot came along and Power Query came along, I learned those things. So
Mm,
I kind of got into loving my Excel that way. I wouldn't know how to do a VLOOKUP unless I looked it up. Although at least nowadays I know enough to say that an XLOOKUP is I suspect the better way of doing it.
Never
Um,
understood XLOOKUP. Actually, I was speaking to Oz Du Soleil a few months ago, and I promised him that I would actually do an XLOOKUP just in respect to him, but I still haven't done it yet.
hmm.
VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, I'm not sure what the crack is there. I'll get into it. I'll have a
I
look.
think XLOOKUP is the next. It's the kind of universal, much better one than VLOOKUP and
Oh,
HLOOKUP. But I've played around with dynamic arrays as well. I mean, I
okay.
love dynamic arrays. It's nice that Excel has got a bit of it's got a bit of buzz around it,
It has.
like
It
the
has.
new advanced Lambda editor that came out last week.
Yeah, I wasn't
That's
expecting
pretty
that.
nice.
That's very cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, it's kind of it's catching up a little bit in that regard. In the user interface, I mean, Excel is always going to be awesome, right? But
Yeah,
in interface, it's quite nice. I was watching you. I forget which. I forget you do so many live streams and presentations. I forget which one it
yes.
was you were doing. You're the seasoned pro, but there was one you were doing something with MDX, and you were just typing in MDX, and it was. I mean, my MDX is shockingly bad. I mean, it's basically doesn't exist, but it's shockingly bad. And I was watching, and I was thinking, did Chris? Did he? does he dabble in the dark arts? Is there some kind of witchcraft that he uses to get so good at MDX? Is that true? I mean, I'll start
Well,
these rumors. Is the rumor true?
it was years and years of practice. Although I have to say, it's been some time since I've written some MDX. I mean, I've been doing a couple of I've been doing a kind of Excel Power BI demo. In fact, I recorded the same demo or some demos for Power BI Summit, which will be coming up in a couple of weeks.
Cool.
And there's a little bit of MDX in there. I think it'll be, it'll never leave me, but it's been a while since I've written any kind of good MDX. I think it's, I'm not as good as I used to be. Definitely.
I'm sure what you considered not as good as it used to be would still be me. I watch and be like, yeah, that's definitely witchcraft. So, but basically, what you're saying is it was hard work and effort. There's no shortcuts, because that's very unfortunate. I love some hard work. Yeah,
practice every day.
Fair enough.
Regular practice. That's the key to anything.
That's very true. That's very true. On that note, if there was any knowledge that you could get loaded into your brain, like Matrix style, what would it be? It doesn't have to be data related, by the way. It could be anything. I'm just curious. What would that be? Because I've always wanted that.
I mean, stuff I'd like to learn. I mean, I really do think if I had some time, I would definitely want to learn Python properly, learn Spark properly, really get into that side of things. Because, the things I'm interested in are always slightly tangential to the things that I know. But I love Power Query. I love kind of self-service data transformation. So it kind of makes sense to get into the today's modern industrial strength data transformation. I mean, I've played around with Azure Data Factory. I don't really know anything much about it. I've never done anything with Spark, but if I had the time, it would be lovely to get into that side of things a bit more. It's so powerful and so interesting.
Yeah,
that's true. You always think, well, maybe somehow, if we can kind of weld the kind of user friendliness of Power BI and Power Query to the power of these kind of big data transformation tools, something good could come. We're already going a little bit down that route with Power integration in Azure Data Factory, which was, I'll be honest, the main reason that I decided to do anything much in Azure Data Factory.
Okay.
And I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's not quite there yet, but it's going in the right direction.
Baby steps, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Exactly.
Yeah, good. Python would be that's a good one, to be honest. I did a Python course about 2 years ago and then didn't touch it since, so I've forgotten literally everything. And it's always the way, unless you have a project in mind, unless you have a use case, it's just not going to happen, because it was it was on top of everything else. Obviously learning everything Power BI related, all the updates, all the new stuff, and then you go down a path. You don't choose the path, but something interests you and it leads you that way. Like now with all the Vega Lite type stuff, it's really interesting. But it's always nice to have an idea. But
I mean, I would love to spend time getting into that as well. I always think it would be great to learn that, then get probably into Charticulator, but everybody on the CAT team has got their own particular strengths, and I just don't have time to get good at the things that I'm get better at those things when there are other people who've got those skills, and we can call on them to do something when we need it. That makes sense. I mean, I kind of going back to what you were saying earlier, I do agree. There are a lot of things I would love to learn, but I would never spend the time learning them unless I knew I was going to use them, and therefore that it would actually stick. Because you're right, if you don't actually use it after you've learned it, then it just disappears equally quickly. I mean, I remember back years ago when I was doing MDX training courses. Still, I did a training course in Germany. And I kind of walked in on the first day, and there was somebody sitting there, and I said, "Oh, sorry, I know you. Didn't you do this MDX training course before?" And this person said, "Yes, actually, it's the third time I'm coming on your course, because the first time I did it a couple of years ago, I really loved the course, but then I didn't use it in my job, so I forgot about it.
Mm.
And then I had some more training budget, so I thought I'd come on the course again and really enjoyed it, and then forgot about it. And now I'm in a new job, and it's been so long since I've done any MDX, I've forgotten it. So I thought I'd come on your course again.
Yeah.
But that's what you want as a trainer. You want the same people coming back over and over again to pay you money for the same course. It doesn't happen that often.
Easy money. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
In my previous job, I there was a couple of people, and they definitely took. We did like a Power BI course. It was over like 3 days, and the same person definitely did it at least 3 or 4 times. And also, it's a smaller company. It was a big company, but we work in smaller groups. And I just knew this person and just didn't have the opportunity to actually ship so many projects and working really deeply with Excel, and just not to have an hour. I mean, for me, when I first started using Power BI, it was really a few hours a day, because it became like a strange obsession, which kind of paid off, I suppose. But really, up until midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning, like every day, just like going at it, learn stuff, and you need it.
Absolutely. And you just got to keep practicing even the stuff you do know, because you lose it if you don't use it.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't do as much of it, but again, kind of years and years ago, even before I was blogging, I did a lot of answering questions on news groups and things.
Okay.
And a lot of the benefit of doing that is that you not only kind of learn stuff you didn't know, it forces you to make sure you really learn the stuff you do know. Just endless practice of doing the same old thing over and over again. It just gets ingrained on your brain, and you learn it so much better. And I suppose that's how you get to being able to just sit down and write an MDX query without ever thinking about what the syntax is.
Yeah, you can't underestimate repetition. Really, it's just drills it in your head. I just finished making a video about Deneb yesterday, and I swear, to do what I was doing in the video, I just did the same thing like 10, 15 times, making the same mistakes over and over again, and then correcting them and all this type of stuff.
Well, it's the same with them doing demos at conferences and things. It's coming up to conference season. It's SQL Bits coming up at early March, and this is the point where I'm beginning to panic because I haven't done enough preparation for it yet. But there's nothing that forces you to learn stuff better than knowing you're going to be on stage talking about it in front of a large crowd of people, and the kind of the worry of being exposed on stage really does focus your mind.
It's really interesting that you still think that, because obviously, as a person who hasn't hardly done any live demonstrations, I do these live discussions. Actually, part of the reasons I do these live discussions is because they're just discussions, and if there's a question I don't want to answer, I'm like, just ignore it. But tomorrow I'm doing with Reed a live session, which of course I'm terrified about, naturally. Just to kind of that moment where you kind of make a mistake and you got to think on your feet and work out what the mistake is that you made. It is a nerve-wracking thing, but interesting that someone like yourself, who I say has all that experience, still has that anxiety. It makes me feel better about my anxiety,
I think as soon as you lose that anxiety, that's when you really screw up doing presentations. And I've done so many presentations. I kind of had the anxiety, and then got complacent, and then screwed up, and then felt bad, and then the memory of having screwed up is enough to make you more anxious, or at least, I don't think I ever get anxious, but a little bit of fear, like I said, is a great motivator to actually sit down and do the preparation work you need to do.
Yeah, that's fair. I was going to pull up a very specific question. Any thoughts on when an alternative result in a switch evaluates based on the complexity of the alternative? That's all for you, mate.
This is a good question. I can't remember whether, I'm not sure whether Marco and Alberto have got around to writing about this yet. But anyway, I think the problem that's being referred to here is that if you've got a DAX measure with a switch function inside it, you've got a whole bunch of conditions and a whole bunch of outputs for each condition. And you would think that there's like one possible branch that will be output, so that'll be the one that gets evaluated. That's not true. Not always true. In a lot of cases, it's actually more efficient to evaluate every single branch and then just return the bit that you need to return. And when that happens, nobody cares about every single branch being evaluated. In some cases, though, doing that is less efficient. And there were a lot of cases where measures in particular that use switch statements, things related to the kind of classic disconnected table pattern, where you want to be able to switch measures used in a visual, where it was clear that the more branches you added to your switch function, the slower everything got, because every single branch in the switch function was being evaluated. We as in Microsoft, not me personally. Jeffrey Wang and his very clever team of developers did an optimization that went into production last year, sometime maybe midway last year, which captured a lot of the kind of common cases where that was a problem, and improved the performance. And testing that on some customer data sets, I could see cases where there were queries that went down from 30 seconds to 3 seconds because it was the optimization was kicking in. I thought Marco and Alberto might have blogged about this, but maybe I'm not quite sure they did. But I mean, it doesn't capture everything. There are still always, there are still cases that I've seen where it doesn't happen. This typically happens when you've got kind of several layers of nesting of measures. And you do have to write your DAX in a particular way, but the particular way is pretty much how you would, 99% of the time write it. So yes, it's it has been more of a problem in the past. It can still be a problem. I would always say two things when you've got slow performance and you've got a measure with a switch in it. The first thing to do is if you're curious about whether the switch statement is affecting performance, you capture your DAX query, paste it over into DAX Studio, run it, see the kind of overall performance, and then take your measure, comment out all of the branches that you don't expect to be evaluated. So you should know the branch that does get evaluated. You comment out all of the rest of the branches. Won't affect the output of the measure because these are the branches that aren't being returned. And then once you've commented out those branches, see what the impact on performance is. And if you see a big impact on performance, well, the switch statement's your problem. You might need to rewrite it or think about another approach. The other thing to say about this is that, like I said, you tend to use the switch statement with the disconnected table pattern, where you've got a table not linked to any other table in your data set, where you've got a list of rows which represent a measure that you might want to select, and then you have a measure and a switch that says, if I've selected the row in this disconnected table which is profit, then return the value of the profit measure. That's something that you can also handle perhaps a bit more elegantly with a calculation group. And I know calculation groups need tabular editor and blah, blah, blah. But calculation groups behave differently from a performance point of view and quite often perform better. Not always better. There's always complications and pros and cons.
Sure.
So if you have got a switch which you think is performing badly, it's always worth trying to see whether a calculation group performs differently.
Wow. That's a Impressive answer, I've got to say. I'm impressed when people get to the point where the DAX, where they write it and it works, and then they check performance. For me, if I write it and it works, I'm like, yeah, okay, done, finished. It works now. I'm moving on. If it takes a minute, I might look at performance, but I'm like, yeah, it works. Can we move on to the next problem now?
Yeah. I mean, I'm never bothered about a DAX query taking 3 seconds rather than 2 seconds. I mean, even 3 seconds, but it's all right. A DAX query that takes 30 seconds or a minute, I think that's something that needs a bit of attention.
Yeah, that's true.
That's when people start getting bored.
Yeah, you got to click, and then you got to count. And then it happens, because then you'll do the standard thing. You'll click and nothing happens, and you click somewhere else, and then it all just goes to hell. What do you actually, just before I move on to the next question from Javi here, what brings you most joy? What do you prefer? Can you rank MDX, M, and DAX? Actually, I must admit, the original question that I wrote down, because I was writing down some silly questions, was kiss, marry, kill, MDX, M, and DAX. But if you want, you can just rank them. I'm just curious.
Well, I don't do any MDX anymore. It's been a long
enough,
time since I've done anything.
So we kill MDX, that's fine.
Yeah, so yes, put it down gently rather than kill it. But if I was going to be going to choose between DAX and M, I would always probably choose M. I love M. I think it's you can't always explain what you love. But it's not that I don't like DAX. I do like DAX.
Yeah.
But I feel more passionate about M, definitely.
Yeah. I was in a training once, and we were talking about M, and I mentioned that I love M. And one of the other people in the training was like, "How can you love M?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just do. It's nice to write with, and it pleases me. And also, cleaning dirty data brings me great joy. So that's part of what we're doing there. So
yeah.
Sorry, another question before I was going on my random strange questions about Kiss, Marry, Kill. Do you see new things yet to come on Excel integration in the Power BI roadmap, or is it mostly immature?
Well, I mean, looking into my crystal ball, yes, there are new things happening in the world of Excel Power BI integration, and new things, lots of cool stuff happening in Excel anyway. So I wouldn't say it's mature. I can't comment about what may or may not be coming. Our plans change all the time anyway. So even the things that I have heard about may or may not happen. But I do think that there will be more happening in this case. And, thinking about what I can say, one of the things that is our kind of, a kind of guiding philosophy in Power BI is that we want to have BI for the masses. We want to reach as many people as possible. And a lot of the people we want to reach are people who build reports in Excel. Mm-hmm. So, Power BI has got a gigantic market share for a BI tool, but it's tiny compared to Excel, because Excel is one of the most popular bits of software that has ever existed and has stupendous numbers of users. Now, if we're going to capture the self-service market, the easiest way of going about it is going to the people who currently use Excel and kind of luring them a little bit away to Power BI. And the way you do that is by having great Power BI Excel integration features. So, in terms of a kind of motivation for us to build this stuff, then yeah, that's a very big motivation, because there are just tons and tons of people that we could reach in the world of Excel who could potentially be Power BI customers as well.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. But yes, it always interests me when people talk about the use of Excel and the adoption of Power BI. There's always this thing about the cost, the expenditure, and it was the concept that Excel was free. It's like, yeah, but Excel's free. It's not free. You're just so used to paying for it that you don't even think of it as an expense anymore. It's the standard thing that every business has. Like, if a business operates and doesn't have Excel, then that business probably won't operate for very long. Just there,
I'm a firm believer that that there's definitely a better together story for both of them. A lot of the stuff you can do in Power BI to kind of get over the kind of limitations of Excel, and there are a lot of things that Excel does better than Power BI. I mean, one of my kind of hobby horses is that if you want to explore data, There's nothing better than a pivot table. And there's a lot of stuff in Power BI which you could kind of do pivot table type stuff with, but it's never quite as good as a pivot table. And honestly, if you want to explore data, if you want a pivot table, use an Excel pivot table. Don't try and recreate it in a matrix visual in a Power BI report. I mean, a Power BI report is never going to be as interactive and freeform as a pivot table. So just use a pivot table. You can use a pivot table, and now it works all in Excel online. You can share it with other people. You can collaborate. It's incredibly powerful.
But this is the joy of opening a Power BI data set with an Excel, though, right? Because you open the Power BI data set in Excel and you have it there in a pivot table. It's a beautiful thing. And then no one has to upset me and say, Ben, can I export this report to Excel, please? I don't have to cry inside when I've spent months creating a report.
Yeah, I mean, people. I mean, you might be crying still because, as we all know, people always want to export to Excel because that's the reflex action.
Yeah.
And however much I would love to lure people away to to better ways of doing things, away from export to Excel. Again, we'll never win that battle. There will always be people who want to export to Excel.
Unless someone centrally in Microsoft literally just deletes Excel from every single computer in the world, then no, that's you got to pick your battles, right? The MDX-based Excel pivots will never be as fast as a DAX-based Power BI visual.
Yeah, I mean, this is another interesting question. I think it's definitely true that pivot tables can be slower than the equivalent DAX. I mean, there was another performance optimization that was it last year or the year before, called MDX Fusion, which did kind of improve the performance of MDX queries on Power BI. It is also, I mean, I think this question has been perhaps a little bit biased by Marco and Alberto's anti-MDX propaganda. There are definitely cases where MDX can be faster than DAX. For example, because MDX has proper caching for the resultant calculations, which DAX does not have. So, if you've got really complex calculations, you run an MDX query once, it might be slow, but the second time, the result of all of those complex calculations can come back directly from the cache, and it will be super fast. So, there are, again, kind of complications with how pivot tables generate their MDX, which there could be some optimizations there. But I think maybe the performance differences between MDX and DAX are a bit overstated. In most cases, any performance problems are more related to the fact that a pivot table can return quite a large amount of data, or maybe you haven't kind of done your modeling properly or whatever.
Fair enough. Makes sense. Just going to come back to this for a second. Mac users don't have Excel either. Mac users also don't have Power BI, do they? Or they run it in over some kind
of... yeah, Mac users don't have Power BI desktop. I mean, Mac users can do stuff with Excel because nowadays, as in the last couple of months, you can open up Excel online and create a connection from an Excel Online workbook directly back to Power BI. I think we've announced that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that works internally inside Microsoft that isn't rolled out, but I am pretty sure Excel Online nowadays, everybody's got the kind of ability to build a new Power BI dataset connection from Excel Online. It's been around for me for a while. I think there was even a blog post about it. So if you're a Mac user who's got an Excel license who wants to use a pivot table against a Power BI datasets, no, you can't do it from Excel on the Mac desktop, but from a browser, you can absolutely create a new pivot table, connect up to your Power BI dataset, start analyzing data.
That's cool. I was reading a blog post saying that you'll shortly be able to open Power BI files directly from online, for example. I'm sure I saw this coming in June or something, this planned update that Currently, you have to download the PBIX and then open it, and then shortly you'll be able to actually just open it directly from whatever OneDrive, SharePoint.
Yeah.
I can,
Think
I
I
can,
can comment on that just
I,
yet. So
I see some reluctance in your eyes. I'm sure I read it on an open blog post. I'm sure it was there
yeah, it's
somewhere.
probably, I think you'll have seen it on the release notes website.
I love it when I get to a no comment. By the way, it's really good fun when I see someone. I can't no. We're getting some
Yeah,
secret
the
stuff
hardest
right
part
now.
of the hardest part of my job is remembering what I can and can't say. And I'm
Exactly, in
not even
SharePoint
sure I
Nation.
know enough about this to be able to comment on it. But
Yeah.
it's definitely not something that I probably could talk about,
Oh,
even if I did know.
I would never want to make you feel uncomfortable, mate. So let's just move swiftly on.
It's all right. It's all right. I deal with this every day with customers.
Oh, fair enough. So fair enough. What's something that frustrates you that you can't do? Like it's something that you come in a contact with on a daily basis when you're working with your M, or something that feel restricted by, or are you at the point now where you just kind of like breeze through everything because you have this knowledge? It's like a restriction, and you wish there was some kind of feature that didn't exist within Power Query within M.
Within Power Query, what
Yeah.
would I like? It would be nice if there was an easy way to connect to APIs without always, without in most cases having to create a custom connector.
Yes.
But
Thank you.
the restriction on custom connectors exists because authentication is difficult, and everybody, people say, oh, it's OAuth 2, but there are just so many different variations with how actually that works. There's no way we could have something that kind of works universally for every single
That's a good
API.
point. I really like that answer because I work with APIs a lot, and I put a lot of time and effort into working out how to do it, how to use authorization, and I was always curious as to why there's, in my opinion, I could be wrong, no great documentation as to how to connect, or why there's no good connector. But what you just said makes sense because there are so many different ways of doing it. But there are more standardized ways. I mean, there are plenty of APIs that you hit where you've got to pass your username and you've got to pass your password within the header. It would be great if that was supported, because I always have to do that on my own, and it seems unnecessary.
Yeah. I mean, that's when you've got to start writing some code to do it, which is, I agree. It could be better. I mean, I suppose the problem is, in the grand scheme of things, there are other fish to fry, and not many people need to connect to APIs. It's kind of only when you get to the more power user type level. But yeah, I agree. It can be a bit frustrating.
On the flip side, sorry, please.
Well, I mean, one last story about this. I remember doing a conference presentation at not the PASS Summit. I think it was like the Business Applications Summit, and I did a presentation on APIs and things. And there was like one guy in the audience who was like visibly getting really, really angry about this particular limitation. And then as the presentation went on, I realized that it was this guy called Daniel Filstra or something. He was basically the guy who invented the spreadsheet. He's also the guy whose picture you see in lots of memes online.
What's his
I won't
name?
say why, but he's a very distinctive looking person, which is how I recognized him, because it was that guy from the meme and things. And yeah, he came up afterwards and told me how rubbish Power Query was because it couldn't handle APIs, which was a bit stinging coming from somebody who was like the inventor of the spreadsheet.
That's heavy.
He's now the guy who I think he still owns the company that makes Solver, the Excel solver out there. But to be honest, he had a point, and that's what we're discussing now. Daniel Filstra, I can't remember.
Filstra, okay.
Yes, and if you googling for it now, you see his picture.
Yeah,
you know his face, don't you, or his his look.
Yeah, I get it.
Verified, certified genius. Software industry legend, and he was equally unimpressed.
Impressive. I have opinions on this subject because I work with APIs a lot, right? So it tends to be what I do is we have an external data provider, and I'll connect to the API, but there is a flip side that yes, it's frustrating that there is this limitation that you have to do a lot on your own. But on the other side of that is that there's this feeling of immense satisfaction when, and how I say, I defeat the API, which means I get the data and I can extract everything I want from it, and it's a wonderful feeling. So if it was easy, I would be deprived of this feeling of awesomeness. So maybe I shouldn't
Yes.
complain too much.
Absolutely.
It's a great. Actually, this is going back to what you said before about Python. This is actually one of the reasons. I mean, that would be great for Python, because what normally happens is I'll do a Power Query and I'll create a process, and then when we come to the data warehousing process, I hand it over to an engineer who does it with Python. It would be nice to kind of take it to the next stage too. But yes, it's one of those things.
Yeah,
It
and
it
I maybe the last thing to say here is that there are wonderful things in the works for Power Query this year, which
excellent.
again I can't comment on.
No,
But,
I would never expect it.
stay tuned for amazing news in the world of Power Query.
If I ask one question, maybe I can see if I get it. Does it involve IntelliSense being updated?
No,
Ah,
sorry. I hope we do that actually, because yes, that annoys the hell out of me as well.
yeah.
I am constantly just getting the same, the same function name repeated twice because
Yeah.
I've
It
done
would make
something.
more sense if actually you change the entire M language. So instead of text contains, it would be text contains.
It's contains, yeah.
That would just
Exactly.
make it recognize both versions. Okay, fair enough. So I can get over IntelliSense as long as I know it's not coming. My expectations are lower, therefore I won't be upset when it's
Well,
not.
it's been a while since I've asked, so maybe somebody's going to fix it as part of the kind of new exciting work that's taking place.
Fair enough. So I look forward to everything that happens within Power Query. It's an interesting thing. The Power Query that you have, well, Power Query is Power Query, which is confusing, by the way, because if you use Power BI, I don't think it's ever actually called Power Query. It's referred to as the data editor, no? Or the transform data window.
No, I think it is the Power Query editor. I think I
Is it
have
Power Query editor?
Power
Okay.
BI desktop opened. If I
Yeah.
click on transform data, I am sure, yep, at the very top of the screen, you will see it says Power Query editor.
Okay, I stand corrected. Because I always just say open Power Query, and then the question is, where's Power Query? And I go, okay, you got to go to transform data, and that opens Power Query. I know they're pretty much identical in terms of functionality. Is there anything that you can do in the Power BI that you can't do in the Excel, or is the functionality completely identical?
There are different connectors.
Okay.
So the connectors vary depending on the edition of Excel you've got. And there are a bunch of connectors that are not available in Excel and only available in Power BI. Excel doesn't support custom connectors either.
Did not know that.
Thinking in the other way, there is a button in Excel Power Query that doesn't exist in Power BI, because that's the button that allows you to generate an output as an Excel data type. So if you wanted to spit kind of Excel data types out of Power Query, there's a button for that in the Power Query editor in Excel, which obviously wouldn't make sense in Power Query and Power BI.
Fair enough, so that's cool. I thought I'd take this opportunity to ask that question, because every time I mention it in the trainings that I give at work, I'm always saying they're identical. I'm pretty sure they're identical. There must be some differences, so I thought I'd just clarify that point now before
they're near enough. I did.
Yeah. How they look as well. I feel like the Excel version looks a little bit more old school sometimes. But yes.
Yeah, but actually, unlike the situation with Power Pivot, I believe the engine inside Excel does get updated on a pretty regular basis, and is, I think, pretty much the same level as the engine that you get inside Power BI. Of course, it depends on how often your Excel updates.
Yeah, if it's me, it's not often enough, because I am.
Yeah,
it's not a
yes, yeah. But also going back to Mac users, Power Query on the Mac is being delivered in small increments.
Okay.
So even if you don't get your Power BI, get your Power Query in Excel on the Mac. And who knows where else Power Query is going to pop up. I think actually it's been publicly discussed somewhere, but there is a long-term plan to have Power Query and Excel online as well. I think one of the PMs has mentioned that publicly before.
That'd be cool.
And yeah, again, I think if you have a look in Excel Online at a workbook with a Power Query query in it, you can actually see, you can pop out the pane and see the list of Power Query queries in your workbook in Excel Online. You can't refresh them yet. Not even the version of Excel Online I've got works. But every month I go to Excel Online, I open a workbook with the Power Query query, and I wonder whether this is going to be the month when I can finally refresh it.
It's there as like a teaser, right?
Yes, exactly.
I like it very much. That's very cool. Oh, interesting. I was just thinking about updates. I realized yesterday that I haven't actually updated my server management studio since about 2019. I just kept, because I don't open it very often. I opened it and I was like, okay, so finally I'll open it this one time, and I'll update it this one time. So I opened it before I did some work. It's not the area that I work in quite often. It's more Power BI, that kind of stuff. And then I opened it and it was like, okay, updates. So yes, updating stuff to more.
It's a good idea to update
Good
it.
thing. It is.
If you've got an older version, there was some performance improvements. So I think midway through last year, it was getting to the point where it would take about a minute to connect Profiler up to a premium workspace through the XMLA endpoint. And they did some updates there, and now it's a lot faster.
Always update, that's what we're all about. Let's take a question up. Any idea when the dynamic M parameters would be available to use with SQL Server? There you go.
Very soon. Very soon indeed.
Wow, it's a well-timed question, isn't it?
Yes.
Very soon indeed. I'm expecting weeks on that one.
Well, yes. I mean, again, it's something that we've promised, and it's one of those obscure bits of functionality that I really like. But I do a lot of work with customers who do direct query on kind of large data sources, and to get the best possible performance, sometimes you need that precision that dynamic M parameters give you. They give you a lot of control over how injecting values directly into your SQL queries. So yeah, I am super excited for that to be released, and when it does, there will be I'll do another blog post. I've got another blog post planned on it.
I was just thinking about connectors and all things connection. I rarely look at the connectors within Power BI, because it tends to be that when you do your job, when you do your work, you use the same ones, like either empty when you're going to connect to an API, so you can write your own SQL, all that kind of stuff. I very rarely actually scroll through them all and look through them all. There are so many. I think I've worked with Power BI since the end of 2016, and I've probably used like 1% of them. It's crazy.
Yes, but everybody uses a different 1%.
Of course, yeah, for sure. No, I'm not saying they shouldn't be there. Absolutely, I just find it really.
I know. I mean, one of the good things about my job is that because I work with so many different customers, you get to see all of those customers, all the different data sources.
Must be so interesting. Yeah,
it is definitely.
Well, I remember looking at it and thinking, I was like, what's this picture of a monkey? What is that about? And it was like Mailchimp or something. I'm Googling, what is Mailchimp?
I used to use Mailchimp to send out news, to advertising newsletters and things like that. Yeah, it's a good tool.
Once I Googled it, I thought, okay, so that's what it's for. But it's actually interesting discovering data sources.
It's what you need. If you want to build up your your social media profile and everything, you need to have a mailing list. So Mailchimp would be good for that.
I should really start to sell myself a bit more, right?
Yeah. I'd be like Mark and Alberto with their kind of weekly newsletter.
Yeah,
probably done with something like Mailchimp.
Most likely, and also AI as well, probably. So you have your AI newsletters I've seen these days. My God, I'm not good at marketing. I will never be good at marketing. Selling myself is the thing that I'll always be extraordinarily poor. I'll just plod along at my own pace and see what happens. But yeah, it's always good for it. And then maybe that could be a cool project actually regarding connectors. Maybe like once a week, try a new connector and see what it does, and then see what you can produce and see where you can source data from.
Yeah, the problem
Nice.
is like getting the source up and running and understanding how to install it or whatever.
Or paying for the service.
Yeah, exactly, which you probably don't want to do.
All right. That's been like 45 minutes. There's been loads of great questions. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not saying we must stop there, but it feels like, it's when it's a nice place to stop. We can call it a day. It's been really interesting to hear your very thorough answers, especially when it comes to the DAX and the M part, because sometimes I'm listening, I'm trying my best to learn. I was like, yeah, like 70% of this answer is going over my head, but someone's getting something out of it, which is very good. And I'm learning as they learn, and it's always much appreciated. Thank you for taking the time.
It's been a pleasure being here. It's always lovely to chat. The time has flown by.
It always does, mate. And this is all a new time of the day for me. I'm actually normally, when I start these, I'm normally a little bit worried because usually it's like 9 o'clock in the evening and my kids go to bed around about 8 o'clock. And I have to sit on the bed with my son and my daughter. And quite often what I'll do is I'll set the alarm on my phone, because if I'm reading them a book, I will fall asleep as they fall asleep. So I then have to like set my alarm, and I wake up at 20 minutes before the chat, get my stuff all set up. But this time it was a little bit different. I feel a bit more awake, a bit more alive,
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for the interesting time of day as well. Been really good fun. And everyone for
It's been
asking
a
all the
pleasure.
questions.
Yeah,
Much
good
appreciated as ever.
questions.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for the interesting questions. And I think next week I'm back at the usual time. I think, but I can't confirm that. So I'll post about it on Twitter instead. But thanks everyone. Take care and see you all next Thursday.